James Anderson adjusted the name tag on his faded blue supermarket uniform and glanced at the time on the old clock hanging above register 4. It was barely 8 o'clock in the morning, yet the store was already filling with customers rushing to finish their shopping before work. He forced a smile even though exhaustion weighed heavily on his shoulders. Life hadn't been kind to James during the last few years. After his wife passed away unexpectedly, he was left to raise his 8-year-old son, Oliver, alone. Every dollar he earned disappeared into rent, school supplies, groceries, and medical bills. There were nights when he skipped dinner so Oliver would never realize how tight their budget had become. Still, James refused to complain. He believed that dignity wasn't measured by the size of a bank account, but by the kindness a person showed when no one was watching. His coworkers admired his quiet determination. He was always the first to arrive and often stayed late to help clean the store. Even though overtime wasn't guaranteed, customers appreciated his patience, especially the elderly shoppers who struggled to pack their groceries. He never rushed them. Unfortunately, not everyone shared his values. The store manager, Richard Benson, cared about numbers more than people. Every morning, he reminded employees that mistakes would come out of their performance reviews. No free items, no exceptions, every transaction must be exact. He repeated so often that everyone could recite the speech from memory. James simply nodded and returned to his register. He couldn't afford to lose this job. As the lunch rush approached, the checkout lines stretched across the store. Shoppers sighed impatiently while cash registers beeped nonstop. James continued greeting each customer with the same gentle smile, unaware that before the day ended, one unexpected decision would cost him everything he had worked so hard to protect and change his life in a way he never could have imagined. The afternoon crowd had finally begun to thin when James noticed an elderly woman slowly pushing a nearly empty shopping cart toward his checkout lane. Her clothes were clean but worn, and her shoes looked as though they had survived many winters. She kept her eyes lowered, avoiding the impatient glances of other customers waiting behind her. James greeted her with the same warm smile he offered everyone. "Good afternoon. Did you find everything you needed?" The woman returned a faint smile and nodded. "I found enough." He scanned the few items in her cart: bread, milk, eggs, rice, canned soup, and a small packet of tea. When the total appeared on the register, the woman reached into her pocket and carefully counted a handful of crumpled bills and loose coins. Her hands trembled slightly as she counted them twice. After a long pause, she looked up with quiet embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I'm a little short. Could you please remove the bread and the milk?" James glanced at the two items. They were the most important things in the bag. Without making a scene, he canceled the request and quietly took a few bills from his own wallet, placing them into the cash drawer before finishing the transaction. "There you go," he said, handing her the receipt. "Everything is paid for." The old woman looked surprised. "You didn't have to do that." James smiled gently. "Everyone needs a little help sometimes. I hope someone would do the same for me if I ever needed it." Her eyes filled with gratitude as she thanked him and slowly walked out of the store. James believed the moment had ended there. He didn't notice that the store manager had been watching the entire exchange through the office window. A few minutes later, he called him inside. "You violated company policy by paying for a customer's groceries during a transaction," he said firmly. James tried to explain that he had used his own money, but the manager wasn't interested. "Rules are rules," he replied before placing a termination letter on the desk. With one signature, the job he had depended on for years was gone. James spent the next week searching for work, but finding a new job proved harder than he expected. Every interview ended the same way. Employers wanted someone with a recent reference, and after being dismissed from the supermarket, he had nothing encouraging to show. Each rejection made the future feel a little more uncertain. At home, he tried to stay positive for Oliver. He helped him with homework, cooked simple meals, and smiled whenever his son looked his way. But after Oliver went to bed, James sat alone at the kitchen table, calculating expenses over and over, wondering how long his savings would last. Meanwhile, the elderly woman he had helped couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Her name was Victoria Harrington, the founder and owner of the supermarket chain. For several months, she had been quietly visiting different branches without revealing her identity. Dressed like an ordinary retiree, she wanted to understand how customers were treated when no executives or cameras seemed to matter. Most employees had followed the rules, but few had shown genuine compassion. James had been different. He never asked who she was or expected anything in return. He simply saw someone in need and acted from the heart. When Victoria received the daily management reports, she noticed an employee had been dismissed for violating company policy. Curious, she requested the security footage from that afternoon. She watched the entire interaction in silence. silence. James had used his own money, treated the customer with respect, and never embarrassed her in front of others. Victoria replayed the video twice before turning to her executive assistant. "Who approved this termination?" she asked. "The branch manager, ma'am." Victoria's expression hardened. "Arrange a meeting with him tomorrow morning and contact James Anderson. Tell him I'd like to speak with him personally." The assistant nodded, surprised by her serious tone. For Victoria, the issue was no longer about a cashier breaking a rule. It was about whether the company had forgotten the values it claimed to represent. She intended to find out exactly how that had happened and make it right. When James arrived at the company's headquarters, he felt completely out of place. The building was modern, the lobby was spotless, and employees in business suits hurried through the halls with purpose. He checked in at the reception desk, convinced there had been some mistake. Why would the owner of a nationwide supermarket chain want to meet a cashier who had already been fired? A few minutes later, he was escorted into a conference room. As the door opened, he froze. Sitting at the table was the same elderly woman whose groceries he had quietly paid for, only this time she wasn't wearing worn-out clothes. She was dressed in a tailored suit, and several senior executives stood respectfully beside her. Victoria Harrington smiled as she stood to greet him. "Thank you for coming, James." He looked at her in confusion. "I don't understand." "I believe you already know me," she said gently, "just not by my real role." She explained that she was the founder and owner of the supermarket chain and had been visiting stores anonymously to understand how employees treated customers when no one thought they were being evaluated. "You were the only person who treated me with kindness without expecting recognition," Victoria said. "And instead of being appreciated, you lost your job." James lowered his eyes. "I wasn't trying to break the rules. I just couldn't let someone leave without basic food." Victoria nodded. "That's exactly why you're here." The branch manager was then asked to join the meeting. After reviewing the security footage and hearing James's explanation, Victoria made her decision. The termination was cancelled immediately. The manager received disciplinary action for failing to use judgment and compassion when enforcing company policy. Then Victoria turned back to James. "I don't want you to return as a cashier," she said. "I'd like you to become our customer care training coordinator. I want new employees to learn that policies matter, but humanity matters too." Tears filled James's eyes as he accepted the opportunity. That evening, when he told Oliver everything that had happened, his son hugged him tightly. "I knew helping people wasn't a mistake," he said. James smiled. "Sometimes kindness doesn't bring an immediate reward, but even when no one seems to notice, it has a way of finding its way back." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Enlightened Story, like this video, and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts.